And yes, we are live. It's so good to be live on Facebook. It's been a while. And I'm excited because I'm chatting with someone very special. And I can't wait to pick his brain a little bit because we are gearing up for the course Mixed Media Journaling. And it's starting on Monday, this Monday. And a lot of people are signing up for it, but a lot of people are also wondering, what is this thing? So, and I actually already did a little bit of cycling to the craft store to get some stuff just because I can, and because I'm always really all about drawing, and mixed media journaling is not about drawing. In fact, it's really about expressing yourself in many other ways, which I am very curious to learn more about, and I can't wait, especially after the iPad course, I can't wait to, get my hands dirty with glue and paint and collage and all that. So it will be so much fun to play in such a different way and to use all those art materials. The new ones that I bought, just a very modest few things that I bought, and because I have a lot of stuff already in my drawers, and there's ink and there's paint and there's brushes, so there's a lot that I can use finally that has been collecting dust. So it's good to see that you are all watching and people are trickling in here from all different places. So let's get our guest here on screen as well, Seth Apter, who is actually teaching in the course. Hi, Seth. How are you?
I am so well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad that we got to connect, and we almost did this while we were both in New York, but it didn't work out. So I'm glad that I'm in Amsterdam, you're in New York, and we could actually work this out. So we can share a little of your knowledge here on Facebook. So
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and to be part of the course.
yeah, I've seen most of the videos that you made for the course, and it's so amazing to just see you at work and see you do the demo and how the page evolves and grows and how you make your choices. It's fantastic. So I'd really like to know a little bit more about that process. Are you in your studio right now? It's, by the look of it, yes.
Yeah, you can see from the back wall, that's my inspiration wall,
Yeah.
where I put a lot of things, gifts from other artists, things I bought, my own work, just to always have myself surrounded by things that kind of move me to create.
Right,
And this
right.
is pretty much where I sit and work all the time.
Yeah, are you there every day?
I am here at least part of the day. It's in my home, so I'm always around.
Yeah,
And I spend hours every day in here doing something.
yeah.
Might
That's
be being on Facebook, but it's often working and journaling and creating.
surrounded by all that beautiful art. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's great. Yeah, it looks lovely, and we'll see. Well, we have a few pictures of it actually in the course as well. So, can you tell me a little bit about the work that you do, and also you teach in-person courses? Tell me a little bit about your creative life, so to say.
Sure, sure. I do a lot of different things, which just really excites me because I think I would get bored if I was focused on only one thing. So part of what I do is create art, and I do that for myself. I also do that for exhibitions and other kind of public events. I do spend a lot of time journaling. I have a million and one different journals, all focused on different things. So just depending upon my mood and the day, I might be working in one or more journals. And then, as you mentioned, I do teach. I travel quite a lot. I really travel throughout the world. I'm extremely fortunate to be able to do that. And I teach classes on mixed media art in stores and art schools and studios and things like that. Locally in New York, I also teach at Pratt Institute, which is kind of a fun, exciting thing to do as well. And then last but certainly not least, I am lucky enough to be able to work with a bunch of different companies just to create some different products that are related to art and crafts.
Sounds amazing. Sounds like a very busy, busy schedule for your days. And yeah, just being able to travel and teach and do what you love, that is fantastic. Yeah. So your how many million journals did you say?
I think I said 1.5 million.
Yeah, a million and a half.
Yeah,
Can you tell me
yeah.
a little bit more about your art and your style? I mean, I have a few pieces of art that I can pull up here while you perhaps talk about it, because there's, yeah, you have
Sure.
a very distinctive style.
Well, I basically call myself a mixed media artist, which is confusing to a lot of people. So, when people say, well, what's mixed media? And you try to explain it, it's really a challenge. And I think that's true probably with this class too, in terms of mixed media journaling, quite what that means. For me, it's mixed media is really about the freedom to use any material in any way. It doesn't even have to be a traditional art material. And it's a way to express myself very, very freely. I tend to work very abstractly. These pictures are showing that. I love layers and texture and dimension. That's really, I think, if you have to look at my art and sort of make a conclusion as to what the style is, for me, it's that. I always think, especially in my journals, that the layers of the materials that I use kind of reflect the layers of being a human. So we all have things that sort of we see on the surface, which is the final piece of art or the final journal page, but sort of inside and underneath, we're made up of 1,001 different layers. And I really tried to get that in my art, this idea of history and a story. I think that's really quite important with mixed media, that there's somehow a story involved.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, sometimes I'm very material driven. And so even in my journals, I'll be focused on an object or a color, and that really just drives me. I have this one image, say, it just is the beginning of an entire piece, and a story evolves, but it may not start that way.
Right, right. So is it? I think if you start a journal page, do you know exactly what the story will be, or is it just unfolding as you are going?
Well, in general, I would say 99% of the artwork I make, I have no clue. With mixed media, things just happen. You put down a color, you grab a piece of paper, something directs you in a different way. And so I always let the layer or the material tell me where to go. In my journals, I would say it's probably 50-50. A lot of my journals, I just start. I start because I feel like I need to express something. I may or may not even know what that is. Maybe I just feel like making some art, but I want it in the book format. And I begin a page. And then as I go, usually the story unfolds. In other journals I have, they're much more directed. So, for example, one journal I have, I basically journal my life in art. And it's a little bit more directed because I'm specifically saying, oh, today I did this Facebook Live for sketchbook school. And then I would put a little bit of art or photographs or some drawings in there about that. So it depends on the journal I'm working with, really.
Right.
But that's again, the freedom of mixed media. There's no right answer with any of this at all.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the first things you say in class. It's like there is no right or wrong. And I love that about journaling, mixed media journaling. It doesn't have to be good, even though if I look at your pages, I'm like, that's so good. But hey, I guess that's something you can work towards because you're finding the balance and you're finding your styles and your style and stuff like that. But I think, like you say, it depends a little bit of the purpose, probably, but it is all really about allowing yourself to be an artist, basically. That's how I fill it in, and to express yourself, right?
I agree 100%. That sometimes the artist word, when I teach classes, comes up a lot. People have a hard time sometimes labeling themselves as artists. And sort of my feeling about that is that there's really nothing special or grandiose about the word artist. I say to people, if you have kids, you're a parent. So in my mind, if you create, you're an artist. There's no more, no less to that. And I think that the beauty of mixed media is that to me, it's very accessible.
Yeah.
You know, I find that a lot of the people that I work with completely freak out when I say something like, well, let's draw a face. You know, in my mind, that just shuts people down. Whereas if I say, let's get out some paper and some paint and some ink and let's make a big mess, sometimes people are hesitant, but as soon as they get into it, there's just this level of freedom and excitement. There's a level of play that I think sometimes.
Oops, we have a glitch. That's great. We love glitches. Let's see what's going on. Something on Skype. So we're waiting on Seth to get back. Hang on. See what we can do about that.
You have to think. If you don't think, you're probably in trouble. But in mixed media art, it's letting go of the thought. Overthinking
Hang
ends
on,
up being like,
Seth.
sure,
We had a little bit of a pause
sorry,
there.
okay. You had a little
Like
glitch?
yeah, like a half minute maybe. So sorry, and I
Okay,
forget, of course, where you left off.
okay.
So
Unfortunately, a phone rang on my iPad and I guess it
oh,
obliterated.
that's what happened. Okay, well,
Yeah.
just move on wherever you left off, but just so you know, there was just a little glitch.
Okay, so you may have missed some of that,
Yeah.
but what I was saying is that with mixed media art, the whole thing is about giving up overthinking. That I find when you work too hard in mixed media, that's when the creativity stops. If you're binding a book, if you're sketching, you often have to think. It's just part of the requirement. But to me, in mixed media, thinking is almost the death of creativity because you really just need to let go and let sort of your inner artist and the spirit of whatever you're working on take you. And that's not easy for everybody, but it's such a joy when that happens and you get into that zone. And I think with journaling, especially because journaling in my mind is for me, it's for the journaler. It's not necessarily something that you're thinking about, well, am I going to be able to sell this or what are people going to think of this? And the fact that it's private just gives you this level of freedom just to explore and go crazy with your work and not really care about the outcome. It's really
Yeah.
more about the experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just for you, and you don't need to share it or anything. And what I really like about it too is that, and I've seen that with, I think almost all of the teachers in this course do that. Like sometimes you journal about something or you write down your feelings, and then you actually collage and glue and paint on top of it, so you can't
Yeah,
see it anymore, but it's there. So you have expressed it, and then you make something completely different on top of it, which I really love, because it's not like you are covering up your feelings, it's just you're including it into the art, and it might actually shine through a little bit. And I think that's really beautiful about it. It's not like literally journaling, it's so much more. It's so literally layered.
right. I agree with you. So that's referencing what I was saying before, that a lot of times what people see is just the sum of our parts. And so part of that is that feeling that might be buried deep. And as you know, or paper, you're actually recreating who you are on the page. Plus, I think a lot of people, when they journal personally, always have that fear in their back of their mind. Well, what's going to happen one day when somebody finds all these journals? So the freedom of knowing that you can just layer it and slather it with gesso, and you've done your job as a journaler. That opens up so many possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a very practical question, because you just mentioned gesso.
Sure.
Um, Before this whole course, I didn't understand what gesso even was. I sort of have an understanding. I actually bought like a small thing of it,
Yay.
and I haven't used it yet. But can you
Okay.
just briefly explain? Because I think there's a lot of people like me who are like into art materials, into drawing, into ink and paint and all that. But can you explain what gesso does and how you kind of use it without going into details too
Sure,
much?
sure. Gesso traditionally is white in color, but you can also get it in black and gray and clear and sometimes other colors. And it's a ground for your work. So generally speaking, you would layer it first on a substrate. And what it does, so it could be on paper, it could be on wood, it could be on canvas. And what it does is it gives what's called tooth to your piece. It just basically means it allows everything to stick to it so that any kind of materials you're using will work on your surface. Really, in a nutshell, gesso is kind of chalk and glue and polymer emulsion, which is sort of the technical side of it. But it's just a great ground. But lots of us mixed media artists, we use it for many things. We use it instead of paint. We use it when we want to cover something because it's very, very opaque. So anything underneath it will disappear. So sometimes we might find an element in our work and we'll gesso around it so that element becomes the center point.
Right.
While we're talking, though, about gesso materials, let me just say for those of you who might be watching this video but haven't signed up in terms of supplies, we are all supply hoarders. But that doesn't mean you have to have every supply or any supply that we even use. Again, it's the freedom. So if we're taking out acrylic paint and you only have watercolor, use watercolor. If we're taking out some sort of fancy scrapbook sheet, just grab a piece of paper and tear it up. Really, anything goes. The supply list or the hesitancy of not having it, that should not in any way, shape, or form stop you from making mixed media. It's really important. If you don't need gesso to make this, even if someone in the video is using it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just bought it because finally I can now actually use it, you know. But I
Yeah,
agree. I mean, if you have a glue stick and you have an old newspaper, you're
you're good to
already,
go.
yeah, you're good to go. So,
Yeah.
speaking of having all these parts and pieces, there's a question from Lenore. She's asking, let me see if I can actually bring this into interview so we can read it. She says, "Hi Seth,
Okay.
how do you organize your materials so that you can be debt free while you work?
That I can be debt free.
That you can be debt free as you are when you are
Oh, that
working."
free.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Sorry,
well, let me. No, that's okay. Let me tell you
that was
that.
just my
No, no,
bad
it's my ears.
pronunciation.
Um, uh, for me, I will be honest and say it's a constant battle. My studio sometimes looks really neat and sometimes it's a disaster, and I am forever changing where I store things. But basically, I am surrounded by my stuff. So I just keep the things that I use mostly really in arm's reach. So whether it's pens or markers or whether it's paint or gesso, paintbrushes, things like that, they're sort of just surrounding me. And then I just grab and I reach. And I have a swivel chair. So like there's cabinets behind me that have rubber stamps and stuff. And I can kind of I end up in a very small space. And the truth is that even if my table, I'm in New York City, so we all know it's not a huge space, but even if my table were 20 feet wide, I would end up working in probably a 10-inch by 10-inch section of it, because as I work, there's just a fury of stuff that's piling up, and I don't put things away until way after I'm done. So it's just there. And that freedom, in fact, often comes from the fact that this stuff is in front of me. And I'm very material driven. So if I'm sitting here and I'm collaging and I just see a little scrap of paper in front of me or a rubber stamp, I'm going to just use that. I'm not going to go run around the room and say, I got to find this stamp or what would work the best. You're in the zone. You just grab. And my feeling is if there's a scrap of paper in front of me, it's meant to be used. And I think that's where the freedom comes in. No thinking, kind of grabbing and going.
That totally makes sense, and I also think that it's a personality thing. Because
Mm.
you will see, Lenore, in the course that every teacher has a different type of, different way of working. Some will be super organized, and some will
Who's
be,
that?
well, Mary Beth Shaw has like sections
Yeah.
in her studio that are, you know, parts for wet media and parts for, it's very
Okay.
well organized, and things are like, you know, all the paints are like on yeah,
Oh,
on
a shelf.
on a shelf, and it's like on
Yeah.
color.
Or a cart.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Okay.
Everything looks beautiful. So I think it's also really part of how you are as a person,
Yeah.
and you figure out how to actually do this thing in the best free and creative possible way, right?
I think that's so true, and we all. I know everyone from the class quite well, and we're all mixed media people, but we all have different styles and definitely different approaches. Although I think there's a lot of commonalities, but personality is so key. If you're a person who's extremely well organized and perhaps very sort of linear and structured, your journal will reflect that. And if you're, a hot mess, your journal will reflect that. And it's perfect because that's what journaling is really.
Yeah, yeah,
It's putting
absolutely.
it's putting it's putting you on the page.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
I'm a throwawayer, so I'm like, this is, I can't use this. And now I'm sort of like, I wish I could have, you know, I would have not thrown away that old
Yeah.
magazine or whatever. But here Valerie, for example, says, my studio looks like a snowstorm, all the tiny pieces of rice paper floating around the floor. And she's asking, at what point are the pieces trash versus treasures?
Oh, we could debate that for forever, and
I
that's a
believe so
question we
too.
all talk about constantly.
Yeah.
Most people would say they're always treasure. It's just a matter that if you're so overrun, maybe you need to move some of your treasures on.
Hmm.
Because truly, the scrappiest little piece of scrap. I mean, I could like I'm sitting here, right? I'm right near just stuff that's
Mm-hmm.
just sitting. I'm gonna grab this. I don't know if you can. Can you just see like there's just stuff.
Hang on. Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like there's just little bits and pieces of things everywhere, and that I'm fine with that, because I can kind of stretch out and separate when I need to, and I'm not working on my kitchen table, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Um, but that's Valerie, that's a good question. No
Yeah,
one
and
has an answer for that.
it is. Yeah, well, one of the answers is Lenora is answering. Uh, they can become trash when they are a fire hazard, actually. So I think that's a good rule, you know?
When the line crosses. One
Yeah.
one one note about that. A lot of times when I'm in class teaching classes, I ask people what um, how they identify themselves. Are you an artist? Are you a crafter? Are you a mixed
Yeah.
media person?
Yeah.
And then you get a large group of people, and everyone relates to this, who say, "I'm just a supply hoarder. Like I just have supplies, I don't use them." And then they start talking about the fact that they have some special things, which we all do, things that they haven't maybe in a drawer or on their table that they love to look at, but they never use. And the one thing I will say, although you don't need anything special for this, but I encourage anybody who has good stuff to use their good stuff, because I feel like you want your art or your journal to reflect the best.
Hmm.
And the way to make it your best is to use your best. And so if you're holding back on that small piece of paper that you got in a flea market 7 years ago when you were traveling somewhere, you're never going to get the best out of it. So go for it. Just use it. Put it in there. It'll always be in there. It'll elevate that piece, and you'll still always have it.
That's really great advice. And last week, I actually filmed Danny while he was going through all his art supplies,
I
and
saw that.
he
That man
was
has a lot. He has a lot of watercolors.
He does, yes, and he's
Yeah.
not going to use them either in this course. But I mean, he was quite embarrassed about the tubes of paint that were all dried
All
out.
dried up.
I
Yes.
mean, that's one of those things. Like, yeah, use it while it's there. You know, use the momentum. Use the
Yeah.
why did you collect it? Don't save it, but just use it. I think that's fantastic advice.
Right.
Yeah.
So now what I want to ask Danny is, did he just throw those tubes back in and they're going to be in the box for 5 more years, or did he toss them out?
They
That's my
might be.
question.
I don't know. I left him behind with all this stuff that he took out. It was just sitting on the floor. I was like, okay, thank you, bye now. So I don't know what he did, but I will check with him.
Okay.
He might have thrown it out. Yeah. So here's one question, because I'm quite curious about that too. Gary, she says, do you find journaling limiting to 2 dimensions? I know you do 3-dimensional work. How can you translate that into a journal? I mean, I think that's really interesting, because when I look at your work, to me, there's a kind of a steampunk bit of style in there. I don't know if that's true, but yeah. So how do you do that?
That is a really good question. I tend to work 2-dimensionally in my journals, although there's texture and layers. Whereas in a good amount of my art, not all of it, but a good amount, I do use a lot of objects, found objects and 3D objects. I think what I would say to that is that I would say 2 things. One is that don't necessarily put yourself in a box to restrict journaling to a book format. So sometimes my journals are just loose sheets that I place in boxes or tins. And so one of the things you could think about is, if you think about it unbound, then you could be making on whatever substrate, it could be paper, it could be wood, it could be anything, what you consider a journal page that has 3D elements on it that end up maybe stacked in a box with other 3D element pages. The other thing is that there are ways to make your own journals. I think Keisha's going to show everybody how to make one of them.
Yep.
But there's some technical ways to make journals that have almost hinge pages that give sections in between. Can I roll across the room and show you what I mean?
Roll
Really
around.
quickly?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. That's what the swivel chair is for, right?
Okay. Yes, exactly. So this is a book I made a long time ago. This is I can't take credit for this. I mean, it's my book, but it was in a class taught by Judy Wilkenfeld, who's an amazing Australian artist who's not involved in the art scene that much anymore. But you can see when you open it up, this is called Handbook. You can kind of see that there's 3D elements here.
Can you hold it a little bit more to the left? Yeah. Yep.
Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
that's what I mean. This reminds me a little bit of steampunk style.
Yeah, this definitely has some of that industrial, steampunky. I do a lot with found objects.
Fantastic.
So when you look at it on the side, you can see the way it's bound. It holds all the 3D objects. But, you know, that's not typically how I would create a journal. And you can, but for me, this took a lot of effort and time and thought. And for me, when I journal, my preference is really just to be able to lose myself and not overthink. I have my journal. I knew we were talking, so I just kept it. This is just my current journal, which I can kind of show you.
Yeah. Yes, please.
And this is all in 2D. This is the first journal, I will just say, and you'll see this in the class, where I've journaled without words. I always like to extend the idea of what journaling can be, just because it is so many things. And so I thought, you know what, I want to kind of express myself and try some things where there's just no text. And I've really enjoyed it, but I have to tell you that I've had to hold myself back from not adding words. Luckily, I journal, like I said, many different journals. So I have other ones with words that I currently work on at the same time.
Yeah, and that's often if you set a rule for yourself or you restrict yourself for something, then you start craving that. So,
So true.
yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah,
all want what we can't have.
exactly, exactly. Which
Yeah,
is a good thing. I think it makes you extra creative. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a challenge. Awesome. So I think we're in half an hour, and I think
Okay,
we will keep any, you know, more practical and technical questions for the Q&A actually that we will have at the end of your week in the course.
great.
So for people who haven't signed up yet, I mean, you just saw those pages that Seth makes. There's a lot more of that in the course, and you can actually learn how to do that yourself. So if you haven't signed up yet, just go to sketchbookschool.com and sign up for the Mixed Media Journaling course. It starts on Monday. I'll be taking it as a student. Danny will be taking it as a student. We'll be sharing our art and our learnings and our experience, and I really want you to be my classmate. So thank you, Seth, for this fun chat. I
Absolutely.
learned something. I feel super inspired by the pages that you just showed, and I feel encouraged because it might be a little bit scary to do this thing because it's so new and maybe out of your comfort zone. But I am really excited to get started on Monday. Do you have
Yeah,
any parting thoughts or advice
I'm,
or whatever?
I guess probably if you're watching, either you signed up or you're thinking about signing up. And I just want to say, as since we're talking about journaling, which is sort of personal stuff, I just want to say that my experience in life has always been that when I've been hesitant to do something out of fear, and then I took the leap, those are always the most exciting, memorable, moving kind of experiences I've had in art or outside of art. And so if you're on the fence, I just say go for it. You just don't know what this might open up.
Absolutely, I agree. And you're not alone. We're all in class and we're all, excited and a little bit anxious. And it will be just a lot of fun. And we'll get like our fingers and our hands dirty and we'll make a mess and
Exactly.
make a mess of our desks and our studios. It'll be fun. Thank you so much, Seth. And
All right. See you on the 11th.
see you in class. Bye.
All right. Bye.